Have you ever wondered if it's possible to travel underneath the sea in the One Piece world? And no, I don't mean like heading down to Fishman Island, I mean literally underneath the sea, in the ground, and potentially even riding the currents of magma to get places even quicker. I know that seems crazy, but that seems like a fitting ability for a ship that's given the name of the god of the underworld. And what if I said we already know that traveling underneath the sea is possible? And that's all because of this guy. And you probably have no clue who he is, or that he's the canonical character that is named the legendary boss of the earth.
I didn't know that.
In fact, would you believe that Gidatsu, yes, this Gidatsu, used this thing to dig under the sea, all the way to Alabasta, where tourists now use that tunnel to travel through? You're probably just as surprised as I was to learn that this thing even exists, because it was never shown in the anime, and we only met him during Gidatsu's Blue Sea Life cover story series, and I don't think I can blame you if you skip that one. And I also can't blame you for dropping a like and subscribing to the channel, so I know you want me to keep making content just like this. But let's get on to the theory.
Yeah.
Isn't it a little odd that such a huge ability was just casually thrown in there like that? This mole creature transported Gidatsu and his friend to Alabasta by digging underground and avoiding the sea entirely. Which, if you think about it, that is a way better way than a typical ship, because you don't have to worry about weather or other people on the sea. I mean, if I could build any ship that I wanted, then it would be able to dig so that I can travel anywhere without a problem. But the best ship that we know of is Pluton, and as we learned in chapter 1053, it's hidden in Wano somewhere, and since we haven't seen it, many people seem to think that it has to be hidden underground. And if this is the case, then what if Pluton has a similar ability to the so-called boss of the earth? I mean, Gidatsu took this thing to Alabasta of all places, which is exactly where we first heard of Pluton. However, we know Pluton is in Wano now, so is it possible that the ancient kingdom dug Pluton from Alabasta to Wano? And we all know Wano is famous for its borders, so perhaps those acted as a way to keep Pluton safe. Alright, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we do also have this page, where the legendary boss of the forest is defeated by the legendary boss of the sky, right before they take off underground to Alabasta with the legendary boss of the earth. And what two characters are currently on a collision course in Wano? Luffy, the sun god, and Green Bull, the forest man. Boss of the sky, sun god, boss of the forest man. Maybe you see where I'm going with that. If Green Bull gets past the samurai and Yamato, which really doesn't seem impossible, perhaps the crew will need a quick way to escape. We also know that Vivi is currently missing, and Cobra was assassinated, so if the Straw Hats hear that news, and then ultimately need to get out because of Green Bull, this seems like a very possible destination. I could even see a similar situation at the end of Marineford, where Luffy escaped on Law's submarine. We saw Kizaru and Aokiji use their powers on the water to try and catch them, and if Pluton can dig, then Green Bull might shoot his plants down into the ground and catch them at the last second, but of course he would ultimately fail. This would also be kind of funny because that's twice now where they only escape because of having extremely abnormal ships at their disposal. Something else we know about Pluton is that it has the ability to destroy entire islands, and if you look at the last 5 or 6 chapters, I think Oda showed us an obvious way to destroy islands: volcanic eruptions. Once Law and Luffy sent Big Mom and Kaido into the ground, just those 2 holes caused an absolutely massive eruption. So imagine if Pluton dug a ton of these holes all over an island. The entire island would probably explode, thus explaining how a ship is able to cause that much destruction. And now you might be thinking, not everywhere is going to have a magma pool just sitting there waiting to explode, but that is actually where you're wrong. An oft-forgotten offhand comment from Nami proves this, and it again connects us right back to Alabasta. In the very beginning of the arc, we come across a bunch of steam on the sea from what is called a hotspot that is created from underwater volcanoes. Nami also says that there are more volcanoes under the sea than there are on land. She also says that in some thousands or 10,000s of years from now, the volcano will give birth to a new island. And then right after this, we actually get an interesting comment from Usopp that Luffy won't be around to see that happen if he is a human, which is ironic since Luffy has the fruit of the sun god. And I actually talk a lot more about the importance of this in my last video, and I'll go ahead and put a link down below. But isn't that very interesting that volcanoes are what create new islands? I mean, this conversation proves that there has to be quite a bit of volcanic activity going on in most of the world, even if they can't see it. That probably means that you could create your own islands if you knew how to make those volcanoes erupt, right? And since we just learned that digging some big holes can cause an eruption to occur, this leads to an interesting idea. What if Pluton not only allowed the destruction of islands, but also the creation? The ancient kingdom could have not only used it to destroy islands by triggering volcanic eruptions, but it could even create new ones where they wanted them to exist, perhaps to house people near the ancient kingdom as it grew. And this leads me to another big conclusion. If Pluton can handle the extreme conditions of being underground and near volcanic eruptions, it can probably just outright get in the lava. So instead of floating on seawater, it is able to travel through magma, which apparently even runs under the seafloor, as we just learned in this chapter. You have to admit, it'd be pretty fitting for the best ship to not only float on water, but also float on magma. But obviously this all seems like just a little bit of a stretch. First off, how can Pluton even dig? And then how can it also handle magma? I mean, on one hand, it could just be some type of ship with a mole devil fruit, and we actually already saw one of these yet again in the Alabasta arc. She was able to dig pretty much at will, so maybe Pluton was given her fruit, except it is the model boss of the Earth. Or it could just be this thing's original ancestor that ate some type of ship devil fruit, or my personal favorite idea, it was modified just like Laboon was. And we also know of Zunisha, who seems to be a freakishly massive 800-year-old elephant, so I really don't think a long-living creature is out of the realm of possibility for Pluton. I mean, the boss of the Earth that we meet in this cover story was actually slightly modified so that it could house Gadatsu and his friend. So could you imagine this, but just on a much bigger scale? And whether it's a fruit or the creature itself, it would help explain how a ship built 800 years ago would be so much better than what someone like Vegapunk or Frankie could build today. That always seemed like a bit of a plot hole to me. But if you don't like the Pluton as a mole idea, a more down-to-earth idea is that it could simply be a ship with a drill on it, and maybe the drill is built from some special material. That could be sea stone, liquor iron ore, or an interesting possibility is that it's from an old awakened user of Wapple's fruit. After all, his Wapple metal is already strong enough for the Frankie Shogun, so if you gave that fruit to someone more competent, that metal could probably be even stronger and handle magma. And perhaps you're still thinking, alright, Pluton is a ship. Moles and drills aren't ships, and you would have a point there. But as long as Pluton can carry people island to island in some way, it probably counts as a ship. Plus, it can probably float, and if it's a mole, it can probably even stand up and fight on its own, which would just be super cool. But let's compare this to other ancient weapons, because this is where I think it gets even more convincing. The one that we know the most about is Poseidon, who we know as Shirahoshi. She has the ability to control the Sea Kings, and will probably use them to ultimately pull the fishmen up to the surface using the Noah. In Greek mythology, Poseidon has a pretty direct correlation to the sea, and I think that's important for the other two as well, because Uranus has direct ties to the sky, and Pluton has direct ties to the underworld. And this is where I believe Oda's use of the word ship has been throwing us for a loop, because it has kind of boxed in our thinking on what Pluton could possibly be. Oda can justify the word ship in a million different ways, but he can only justify the god of the underworld in a handful of ways. Because I mean, think about it. Why would Poseidon control the sea, Uranus control the sky, just for Pluton to float on the sea despite being the god of the underworld? Poseidon would technically be closer to the underworld in this case, which doesn't make any kind of sense. I think it is way easier to justify a mole or a drill, or really anything that can dig, also counting as a ship, than it would be for the god of the underworld to just simply float on top of the sea, given all the ancient weapon names. I think we could even see a scenario where Pluton digs directly underneath its final destination, and then just shoots upwards through the seafloor into the surface, thus fulfilling the role of both a god of the underworld as well as a ship. And this could also allow us to make an even more surprising attack on the world government than Whitebeard made on Marineford when he coated his ship and came up from under the sea. So in summary, Pluton is either a mole or some ship made with a special metal that can ride in magma. If you want to hear more unique theories like this one, please subscribe and check out some of my other videos that you should probably already see on the screen. Later.